Great. Well, and thank you guys for having us. Appreciate it. We're actually in Naples. And we just finished up
one floor away from each other, actually.
Exactly. We could have done this in the same place, but we're at the Arthrex Innovation Center, and we had a great Fabien did a keynote along with some other incredible people, people building hearts and fixing blindness, and just incredible. So Fabien kicked it off, and I would say we probably were the wow presentation. So he did an excellent job. It was a TED Talk type situation of 20 minutes. And just laid out just a lot of the ocean conservation and just, Proteus as well. So I just wanted to give Fabien a little kudos. He did a great job yesterday, and people, the people we're meeting here are incredible. We're loving Naples more and more these days. So I'll turn it over to Fabien. I think this is definitely groundbreaking as far as a treaty, and but I'll let the ocean expert tell you what his thoughts are.
Yeah, so sorry, I had to call on my phone. For some reason, the Wi-Fi is not working on my computer. I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest. I think philosophically it's wonderful. I think it's a goal that needed to be achieved 30 years ago. I think the reality is we're behind the 8 ball, and in order to achieve those goals by 7 years from now, we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to require all the powers that be if we're even going to imagine getting to those goals. And more specifically than that, even if we do achieve the treaty goals, then there's a real problem that's been a problem for generations of enforcing the goals and respecting the parameters. I don't know if you want me to get into what specifics you might want me to get into, but I do have my concerns. I've had the privilege of addressing the UN multiple times over the last decade, whether it be for the SDGs or some other topic, and throughout that journey and meeting with government entities, private entities, stakeholders, etc., nonprofits, and a lot of people who do boots on the ground work to help achieve some of these goals, including mapping, etc. I have my concerns. There are undercurrents of vested interests that don't necessarily coincide well with the treaty. Everything from deep sea mining, which is a nuclear topic right now, to other issues, protecting the world's oceans, 30% by 2030, etc. We're still in this mindset that the ocean belongs to everyone and no one, and therefore it's still a bit of a cowboy approach. So yeah, I mean, there's the work is monumental. The work is monumental, and it's going to require everyone's participation for us to achieve them.
If I could just add one other thing, Fabien was followed by the director of the National Science Foundation yesterday in the talk, and one of the, I thought, more interesting things that he said is we're going to accelerate, and we're going to give away more money. We're going to try to help, but we need public-private partnerships. We need everyone to kind of participate. We cannot do this alone, and I think that's really super key to a philosophy that we have at Proteus Ocean Group. Is we have to create public-private partnerships. It can't just be private capital and government. And we're very lucky that we have a Navy CRADA. We're about to sign one with NOAA. We'll get NASA next, but that's not the end all be all, right? Those are just government agencies. We need the private capital to step up, and everyone, and kind of just these partnerships that are now starting to really bear fruit for us. And I think the world, right, we'll start to see some really great advancements in the research and development and solutions and the storytelling, if those partnerships can come accelerate. And I think that's going to be the key to getting to 2030. That's just my
it can't be the tail wagging the dog.
Mhm.
You know, we went through the same process. I remember when I was a kid with, well, I shouldn't say we, because I wasn't actually part of it. I was an observer, with my grandfather leading the charge on protecting the Antarctic, and working with different government entities and all that. And that was certainly a struggle. And we thankfully have, and actually, unfortunately, that's coming up again soon for a revote. But in terms of the 2030 goals, we cannot achieve them without having a public-private partnership, and we cannot just rely on government, as much as government needs to be an integral part of this in order for this to be achieved. This must have the participation of all entities.
Can you maybe speak, who are the key private parties that should be partners, or you know, are already partners, or do you'd like to see as partners? Obviously, you're doing that in a way. Maybe you should. You could explain what you're doing, and then maybe you could answer the other question.
Yeah,
I mean, on a microcosmic level. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead. You go first, and I'll add to whatever you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, on a microcosmic example, Proteus would be an interesting. I mean, this is a little bit self-serving, obviously. I apologize for that, but would be an interesting example of bringing in government entities, nonprofit entities, and private partnerships in order to achieve a goal. In this case, the International Space Station of the Ocean, for the greater good of humanity, as well as for the benefit of the individual stakeholders. And it's a fairly complex approach, but it's one that we feel and we've seen great traction in, because there are seats for all folks at the table. And in today's global society, the only way we can achieve these grandiose aspirations and these grandiose goals, such as the treaty, is to have participants from these different angles, these different interests, and to participate in that conversation and the signing of an agreement that is much more universal. With regard to Proteus, we've had to have conversations that were very unusual conversations, or not non-traditional conversations, because of that. And that really has, I think, been an extremely attractive dialogue that has been unique in many ways, that I think is what gives us a lot of traction. So yeah, go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
And I can give you some specific examples to just kind of bring it home and be more tangible. So for example, September of 2021, we went into Curacao. We did site mapping along the underwater park. We brought in R2 Sonic, which is LiDAR equipment, with Map the Gaps, which is a nonprofit. We work with Carmabi, which is the research institution on the island, along with the blessing with the government, and we brought the capital to pay for the site mapping. Once that site mapping was done, it's all 3D benthic, great mapping that they did not have access to from the funding standpoint. We gave that to the government. We gave that to Carmabi and said, this is information that you all could use. We did it, but here you are. We brought the capital, but we appreciated the partnership. Good example of a public-private partnership benefiting information, giving information to the decision makers.
Yeah, for that, and to interject for 1 second, for that specific example, we didn't need to do that. If we were being just focused on our needs and no one else's, then all we needed was a very small portion of that map to be mapped in detail. But because we had the opportunity to bring in other partners and other people who could benefit from it, especially the people of that nation who we are guests of, it made perfect sense to leverage that opportunity for the greater good.
Absolutely. Another example is two of our Northeastern lead scientists that are working for Proteus Ocean Group just put in a $20 million grant for a full-scaled observatory with sensor networks deployed around Curacao. Curacao would become the first island nation to have that kind of information. So we would be gathering all kinds of information from acidity to salinity to water temperatures to potentially even microplastics. And that is in partnership with a whole bunch of people, right? So that's us and the data company, the data hosting company on the island with the government, and we're bringing in the Smithsonian and other different institutions. Again, another great example. I'll give you one other trend and then I'll stop that I think is happening, and it's not whitewashing, greenwashing, or blue washing, but really looking for intentional companies that want to fund science. And we have a lot of them. Prada is we're close to signing, hopefully something with them that is going to be funding educational programming, ocean science, and marketing services. So a combination of the three. And they're interested mostly in the UNESCO, Prada, Sea Beyond educational programming, both in Curacao and in Italy. So another interesting, same thing with Blue Nap, which is the data center on the island. They want to kind of get out there, but we're saying, great, we'll do a marketing services agreement with you, but we're going to add in science. We're going to add in other pieces. So give us the money to fund this, but we're going to build awareness, public awareness about the ocean, about what's happening and all in the ocean, so that we can use that money for the good. So just some more solid examples for you guys.
Yeah. No, thanks, Lisa. I mean, I welcome questions. I was just gonna, to our point is we shed light on these things, and we're gonna do it on the March 22nd event. We're also in Seattle and San Francisco and Palo Alto, which are meccas for, actually think about the Moore Foundation, how they're focused on some aspects of what you're talking about, and Gates. But we'd love to include you wherever we go. We're also going to be in Oxford and Sheffield, and in England, and so anyway, questions from everyone? Is this on your radar? I know it is for you, Alistair.
Sorry, I just saw a text message go through.
Yes, Mark.
Adam, go.
I've got a question, and this question is a bit more technical, and it's to Lisa and Fabien, of course, and that is the coral reefs and the growing of the coral. How is that technology advancing? What would you say about that technology? And by the way, I'm calling from the Florida Keys.
So first of all, I'd like to answer Marin's question on Prada and making it fun. Yeah, we absolutely have to make it fun. We have to make it engaging for the general public to be part of this solution, and of course the decision makers as well, whether they be in government or private practice or what have you. To answer your question with regard to coral reefs, oh my God, we're stepping in a very complicated deep water. Florida, I love Florida for many reasons. I don't love Florida for the coral reefs. Florida, unfortunately, has some serious struggles ahead with regard to restoration of coral reefs, because there have been a lot of approaches with regard to that, and I'm not picking on Florida. Actually, this can be a statement universally. It's not just Florida, but until we regulate development, until we regulate runoff, until we regulate activities on coral reefs, until we stop knocking the legs off of a four-legged stool, you're not going to see a better coral reef ecosystem. It'll continue degrading. So if we're looking at climate change related issues, pollution related issues, overfishing related issues, a coral reef is a very dynamic, complex ecosystem, and the way typically it survives is that everything works and functions properly. it is a fairly resistant ecosystem in that if you, like a four-legged stool, if you knock one of the legs off, it has a tendency to be able to combat the effects of one of those negative inputs. But when you start inputting too many pressures from various angles, that's when you see what you see in the coral reef ecosystem in the Florida Keys and elsewhere. There's a reason why there are only 2 remaining accruing coral reefs in the entire Caribbean, Curacao being one of them. And that's because we have neglected the basic needs of our life support system, the ocean. And we've used it as an endless resource and garbage can for way too many decades. Until we address those basic fundamental problems at their source, we cannot envision doing successful restoration of coral reefs. One of the big components of the solution building, of course, is marine protected areas. And there's a beautiful, map of the Florida Keys marine protected area. But by marine protected areas, I mean protected. I mean sanctuary. I mean off limits to any intrusive activities. Not necessarily exploration and fun and science and all that, but I mean just leave it alone. Just stop messing with it. Stop developing around them, overfishing, etc. And if you can build those hope spots, then you can envision and hope for that coral reef ecosystem to find a balance and to start restoring itself. Restoration activities. I mean, we've messed around with restoration activities ourselves, including using all sorts of technologies like 3D printing of the stony coral with organic matter to be able to recruit. But we're still subject to all the issues, even during those restoration activities, of all the things that I mentioned before, the runoff and everything else. And so it's very difficult to justify the dollars and cents and effort numbers that you have to have in order to offer those activities when 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, everything is dead again. It's basically wasting money and effort. So I've gone on and on and on, and I apologize for that. But
No.
Coral restoration is not a solution until you address the root problem. Coral restoration is a lot of fun, and it's an engaging activity educationally, 100%. I don't besiege people for wanting to do coral restoration. It's just we have to go beyond that. That can be a component of the solution building, but we have to go way beyond that.
A follow-up question, Fabien.
Hold
please,
on,
Mark,
hold
just
on, Adam.
one more question.
Adam,
And that's just my opinion. I mean, people may have other opinions. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
Adam, first, you and Maren are in the Keys. You guys, you should meet. Have you ever met? I know you met in Miami. I forgot, right?
I don't know if we did.
Oh, you would have
But,
known. You would have known if you had met Maren.
I don't think we did.
You didn't meet.
But
Okay.
Maren is on fire.
I
in the
don't think we
texting.
did yet, and
love
I would
it.
love to meet.
No.
Maren is on fire. Wait until you have a WhatsApp group with her. Fabien.
Yay, all the
Fabien,
emojis. I'm so excited. This is so amazing.
I do. She's awesome.
Fabien, to follow up on
Oh,
your.
thank you.
on
Likewise.
Adam, let's let Stephen have the weigh in, because he is an
Okay.
avid scuba diver and loves coral reefs.
Yay,
Okay.
protect the reefs. Thank you.
Fabian, I had a
100%.
question about how you view the efforts to put the wind turbines and the things that are supposed to make our world better, but putting them in the ocean and what that does to the sea life there. And how do you balance the two out of wanting a better world, but also wanting to protect the conflicts there are high? I'd like to get your sense on that.
Yeah, at the risk of making enemies and getting yelled at, there's no conflict there. No significant conflict. I think there's personal interests and lobbyists that love to create conflict out of this. But geez, that's a very complex set of topics, actually. if done properly, renewables, wind, solar, et cetera, can be done very well, and with respect to the environment. Doing renewables just to do renewables because it's the trendy thing to do, it can be dangerous. Not so much for the, well, yes, to some extent for the wildlife, but not so much for the wildlife, but just because it ends up being a waste of resources. And then you start getting into these conversations where people start doubting the benefits. There are other solutions as well. I mean, it's not just wind and solar. I'm not a proponent of finding the silver bullet on renewables, because every situation in the world requires a different solution. For example, again, I'll go back to Curacao just because I don't want to point fingers to anyone else, but for us, I'm really pushing hard for OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion, because it makes sense. It's a baseline energy, very efficient. You can power the world's needs, if done properly, and that's a big asterisk, but if done properly, 9 times over with OTEC. Now, you can't do OTEC all over the world. It's not a panacea, but with wind and solar, you just have to be able to judge where you're putting it, what the capital input is, and what the return on investment is, as well as what the environmental impact study dictates. So if you're talking about wind being an obstruction to birds, for example, bird migrations, that's certainly a consideration, although I've seen the numbers of the most recent technologies in terms of wind, and they're very respectful of environmental impact. Now, I don't pretend to be an engineer. I know just enough to get myself in trouble, but I would say we have much bigger problems than to debate whether or not to put renewables over traditional means, because the benefits outweigh the cost. The benefits outweigh the risks.
Thank
And
you.
we just don't have the time at this point, having seen all the devastation that we need to catch up on and fix. I think we just don't have the time not to implement solutions. And I'm not against fossil. It's not that I'm not against fossil fuels. We need to wean ourselves off fossil fuels, but there's going to be a progression. Everyone wants to turn a switch on and off, and that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
As much as we'd love it to, it's not going to happen. Fossil fuels will be around for a while, but we can do our. Oops. And I know there's a visual component to that particular question that I didn't answer. And that's really for the community to figure out. Far be it for me from hundreds of miles away to say anything, but
No, we're
within this.
generally, it's a transition.
Yeah,
We'll need it
we
for
had
a
the same
while.
problem up in the Northeast with off of Massachusetts with the wind farm, with the wind turbines there, and that was previous technologies that actually were a step down so that the props would go slower. And of course, there's this criticism that it changes the whale migrations, which it does not. You got to be careful of what people say and do your own research.
So
Yeah,
we're
I was
in
just
German.
curious because I had noticed a lot more whales washing up on the beaches of Long Island.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm not sure that
was there cause and effect, or is that just the currents, the Gulf Stream shifting, or what you thought?
Well,
was
I think migratory patterns shift because of environmental factors, and that has climate change plays into that, because animals go where the food is, right? And has, in my opinion, has nothing to do with the wind turbines, but it does have to do a lot with boat strikes and with other factors, pollution related issues, that sort of thing. Noise pollution being one of them, of course. And unfortunately, the navies of the world aren't transparent about what they're doing in the ocean, so we have no idea if that's a factor. I'd wait to see what the necropsy reports say, but essentially, it's very convenient to point to a specific source, but I don't specifically think, I could be wrong, but I don't think it has anything to do with the wind turbines there.
Thank you and Lisa for all the work you're doing.
So,
Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
guys.
so Fabien, Lisa, let's say I can write you guys a check, or we collectively write a check or a series of checks.
I'm gonna put my mailing address right in the chat
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
So what would, let's let's skip the amounts, but let's say you had what you needed or wanted, or at least needed. And you're gonna set up Proteus and Carousel, they're gonna maybe have a few more.
Mhm.
I can't imagine, by the way, why the US government wouldn't be stroking a check like this too, given how much they're putting into the space program.
Yeah,
But let's say,
We're working on it. We're working on it. The problem with the US, if anything, because we would love to have one in US waters, is the process takes so long. We want to get in the water ASAP.
yeah, like Axiom Space had an in-kind contract. with
Miami
NASA
Bay.
For
Maybe.
3 years. It took them 3 years to convert it to an actual contract. So we're hoping those similar things happen with both NOAA and the Navy, and then NASA as well. So, but finish your question and then we'll.
more like, what do you think we could expect? And over what time period in terms of some research results?
Hmm.
I remember, because I had the recording, I threw it into the chat, that there was a drug from a species of fish that could give you the benefits of morphine without the side effects. Somehow
The
that's
cone smell,
Creole.
yeah.
yeah.
Creole, yeah, it was sold. The chemical chain was sold for 38 million, I think, to a pharma company.
Yeah,
But-
and there are only 14 FDA approved marine derived product on the market today, probably 30 something more in clinical trials. But the fact is there's no real research platform that's in a permanent presence where, we're creating a cost-effective platform, very much like Elon Musk did with rockets, right? Can created a cost-effective way to go back and forth. That idea that the private sector, particularly pharma and life sciences and that whole area hasn't had access. It's like Fabien's Cousteau's example of Jane Goodall, right? You drop her down from a balloon, she's only going to take a few snapshots, got to go, spring back up. That's not going to really allow that kind of ongoing time series research and development. But I'll let Fabien answer. If we had the capital today to deploy more than one of these, if I had Jeff Bezos' $5 billion where he spent it to go to space, burned a little carbon, so he took a few years off our planet, I think we would do a lot with it in a very short period of time. But I'll let Fabien go and then I can always add on.
Sure. So Marin asked if we want to put it in in Miami Bay. Absolutely not. For many very practical reasons, actually. The decision-making process to put an underwater research station where you can do mid and long-term research and data gathering and all that sort of thing is a lot. Yes, too much traffic, exactly. Too much boat traffic for sure. It is a culmination of several factors. First of all, there's a practicality factor, right? There's an accessibility factor. There's a proximity to the subject matters, the number of subject and research subjects, that one would want to be able to offer and to monitor and to extract data from and look at. There's a security or safety concern because you have personnel in saturation for long periods of time. So yeah, Miami Bay might be a little bit too busy in terms of boat traffic and fishing and anchoring and all those sorts of things. The additional aspect of things is how does one fund this, whether there's an ROI aspect like a tenant model or a payload model or something of that sort, and the accessibility to land infrastructure, which is necessary. Just like NASA, you need a mission control, you need eventually boat support, even if it's just for maintenance, and of course safety and any other needs. So there's a lot that needs to happen, And the crossroads of that is what determines where strategically you'd like to place a Proteus of some footprint. It doesn't have to be the same model as the one in Curacao. It could be smaller, it could be larger, it could be different configuration. But those all are factors.
But
So
my,
I'll add
but
quickly to
ultimately,
that.
sorry,
Oh,
Lisa,
Mark, hold on. I'll add quickly to that. I
Okay.
would like to say, first of all, one of our visions is that we want to do this anywhere, any depth, at any size, anywhere in the world, right? So that's the goal here, right? Because and when we create a network of these, what would get accelerated is very much like whether you believe in the vaccine or not, right? That's the issue, is we had a time to market, and again, whether that was a good or bad thing, but it was created by the global collaboration of scientists, private entities, money, private capital, all of that contributed to the time to market of that vaccine. Why, if we could do the same thing with climate change, I think that's part of it. The idea that we could accelerate time underwater and accelerate the time to do the research is really what our goal is. So if we had many of these in different strategic locations, as Fabien said, the goal would be to have all those scientists speaking to each other in a network, speaking to ocean vessels, speaking to universities, because we'd have the bandwidth, and even you may be using Starlink. So really creating an ecosystem of data collection, but collaboration among the scientists and the researchers, and getting that information to the decision makers in a faster, more timely way, so they could create solutions. And then we could also tell those beautiful global engagement stories. That's really,
I mean, I know did we show the slide of the network of underwater habitats? And so, yeah, so the network portion is very important, because it gives us, just like a neural network in our bodies, gives us a much better understanding and finger on the pulse of oceanic health. And that's where those strategic locations would be. Miami Bay may not be the right place, but maybe it's Dry Tortuga, although the infrastructure there obviously would be a problem. But there's a lot of opportunities.
So I'm still, that's useful context. I'm still looking like what could be some of the findings that we could have out of all this, and then the network with the network effect. The other piece to this, other than, as I always like to do, is find what the key catalyst could be for you. Government is tough, right? I can't deliver on the government. But are there particular, just maybe you can do this offline, if there are groups that, as we go, we're going to be with the Gates Foundation, we'll be with the Moore Foundation on the West Coast. If there are others that, I went to, so 361 firms, 360 is about roundtables, about alumni networking, and one firm is being an Arthur Andersen partner, creating global collaboration. And I was amazed, in 2016, I created my first family office roundtable, and people in Boston, many of them didn't even know each other. And then they didn't know each other as well as they thought they did, because I make sure that we all go around the circle and talk to each other. So if there's any way we could help facilitate dialogue that would help unlock something that should be a no-brainer. And then we just want to bring people that are strategic capital to situations.
I think so two things quickly, Mark. So on the findings, right? Like obviously the finding would be if we said start at the end and go back in 5 years or 3 to 5 years, maybe we've discovered a few cures, not just the cone snail venom, but other things. Maybe we've discovered a food source underwater, because we're going to be looking at feeding people right on Proteus in a sustainable way, very much like space entities are right now space companies. So two areas to answer who else can help, or how can you guys help, and connections. We think the space companies, both private and public, are our most fertile ground, because imagine every astronaut training on Proteus before they go to space, but also doing experiments, right? So it's a better way to see if the feasibility of your space experiments can actually work if you actually test it in an extreme environment. So that's a great area for us, but also to do discoveries. You've got to feed people in space in a much healthier way. Maybe there are discoveries that we can come up with while we're experimenting with how we're going to feed people under the water. Science, pharma, space pharma, all those areas are great fertile areas for us to do collaborations with space companies. The Gates Foundation and the more, we have an interesting, unique structure since we're 20% owned by Fabien Cousteau Ocean Learning Center. We spent a lot of time with the NSF over this last few days since they were here, but also thinking about how do we create a way to disrupt science funding. And the NSF is great. It's got lots of money, but it takes you 9 months to get that money. So what if we have donations to the Ocean Learning Center to create the Proteus Ocean Science Impact Fund? And we created an independent board of all doctoral science and research people that make the decision. So you basically turn in a 5-page proposal. You don't wait 9 months to get an answer if you have money or funding, but maybe it's a month. And this independent science board will decide that. And to go do science tomorrow, not when Proteus is in the water, but starting tomorrow. We're already doing that in Curacao, and we have the ability to potentially do it in other areas. So that would be my answer to that.
Excellent. By the way, do you know Esther Dyson?
I don't know. Esther Dyson is such a name from my old past at Goldman Sachs, and I know her and Bill Gates. She and Bill Gates are very good friends. But not had obviously talked to her in years and years.
She plans to retire on Mars. She's a cosmonaut. She's frequent in our gatherings, but she likes frontier tech. I wonder if she ever really looked at this.
At the ocean,
Well,
right?
think about this, Mark. There have been more astronauts in history than there have ever been aquanauts. Yet the irony of that is that to become an astronaut, you first have to become a scuba diver. And if you look at the NEMO missions and all that, they're extremely interested in testing tech and training people underwater because of the obvious similarities and the fact that it's an extreme environment. They're actually looking at Proteus because just like in space, if something goes wrong, you can't just come back to Earth. And despite the fact that the Proteus air-water interface on the main structure is at 60 feet, so 3 atmospheres, 2.8 atmospheres, you can't go to the surface if you have a problem. You have to address the problem right then and there, whether it's a technological problem, a physiological problem, or other. You're independent of the surface, minus the communications to the surface. So these are great anecdotes for space colonization and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
Well,